I actually just graduated from Carnegie Mellon, their grad program called Entertainment Technology Center, where basically you do anything entertainment related. So that could be animation, location-based theme, or games or movies, anything pretty much. At the time, I was focusing more towards animation as well as indie game design. So that's where my specialty was. Back in high school, I started doing a lot of like video production things, basically stop motion animations, motion graphics, and my high school teacher, he was part of SIGGRAPH. He was the vice president for the New York chapter, and he was like, you should really go or try getting into the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon. I was like, awesome, that sounds great. So I applied to CMU, and I was like, I want to be in that program. And they're like, I'm sorry, it's a grad program. So I was like, oh, okay. So I basically stayed at CMU for 4 years, and then from there I went into the grad program. I loved games to death. Played them nonstop. Pretty much my entire high school and college life was all just games, gaming. Not as much work as I should have been doing, but I'm sure everyone has that problem. And I also loved animations, pretty much any kind of 3D animations, 2D animations. So I followed that path pretty rigorously. Mm-hmm. My director, the director of the Entertainment Technology Center, Drew Davidson, he's friends with Tim Schafer, or at least has some sort of connection. So when Brad sent out like the whole listing about, oh, we're looking for design interns, the entire school basically got that that email saying, hey, we needed design interns. So I was like, yeah, I'll apply to that. Funny thing is, most people know me as the 3D artist or the animator. That's more than anything else. I did a teaching assistant position for like 1.5 years, and I was pretty much the to-go guy for everything Maya and ZBrush related. They were very surprised when I was like, I'm not doing 3D art, I'm doing game design at Delphi. And they're like, what? That makes no sense. I was definitely interested because I was working on this mobile indie product called Locanimals that me and my friends basically started up, and I did a lot of game design stuff there, and that got me really interested. I was like, wow, this is actually pretty fun. I don't mind the number crunching. I don't mind the design documents. So I was like, okay, I can try this out and see how that feels in an actual professional setting. And I guess I'm sort of natural at it. I don't know. I had a big math background back in high school and college, so that helps a lot. Statistics, just calculus stuff. Not so much programming oriented. Never had any Lua experience, so I learned a lot from that. Just design-wise, I learned a lot from Brad too.
He had there's like a sort of like a document that you could create levels in just by like putting icons down. Does that thing still exist?
Yeah, I can actually show you one that I made using it. So when I first got onto the level design aspect of the development of the game, they were like, we have this map called Black Sands that is in prototype. We don't have anything designed for it. We just have a lot of assets. And basically I was given the opportunity to make whatever I want out of it. So here we're seeing their map system where you can pretty much prototype it out in Google spreadsheets. So all the TIs are, anything with I's is basically invisible blockers. Anything with T's are like tall blockers, S's are small blockers, P's are your player starts. The gray boxes mean that it's accessible terrain. It's pretty straightforward. They have a formatting guide. So this is the legend for all their symbols. So again, pretty straightforward. I can just do whatever I want and fill things in, and then this would automatically propagate to a Maya layout. So yeah, I created a few versions of the layouts, and Brad approved like one of them and went like, try iterating on this part, and this is what I came up with, and it's actually in the game now. As for the keep maps, I felt like all the other keep maps that we had didn't have many castle-like feels, so I wanted more corridory kind of layouts where you don't know what's in behind like one corner. Like you might walk into this empty hall and suddenly there's like 5 enemies surrounding you. I wanted that kind of aspect. All the other keeps were very symmetrical and straightforward. You just go down the path and you'll finish everything. I wanted more rooms, more castle-like feels basically. And they really liked the idea, so we have that now in the game. So I think that as long as the player doesn't get lost, it is a pretty good experience. Like not knowing what's going to come up, but at the same time not constantly searching for the enemies. So when I was making all the random layouts for every single map so originally the maps only had like one layout where the enemies would spawn at specific places. Players would always spawn at one location. And the problem was that with that is that players could just get very comfortable with the map and know exactly where enemies are. So they go like, oh, I know there's an enemy right around this tree. I'm gonna throw a grenade over there. So my job was to pretty much create randomized sets for each map along with this one. And that took quite a long time, I guess, like about 3 weeks. And basically I went through each level, playtested them, went like, okay, am I getting lost? If I was a normal player, would I take a left turn or a right turn? Just basically like making sure that that each enemy spawn set would be like sort of handheld, where it's like, as soon as you fight one, you know where to go next. As long as I could maintain that kind of feel to the design, I thought it was pretty good. For example, one of the layouts I made was that like you were boxed in this little kind of cage thing, and you had all 5 enemy spawn sets like surrounding your players, and you didn't know that until the turn passed because they started breaking down those cages, the blockers. So it's like, oh my god, I'm gonna be swarmed if I don't kill them all fast enough. They never had that kind of experience before, so it was very like holdout alien invasion kind of aspect to it. So I would agree, I did make things a little harder sometimes. Then I toned down all the levels a bit, spread out most of the spawn sets so that you'd always face 1, maybe at most 2 in a given like 10-tile radius. So I think it's at a pretty good spot right now, yeah. But at the time that I was doing map balancing and like layout balancing, I wasn't able to touch like the stats. So once we got the maps all in a good spot, then I move on to the actual stats of the enemies and the players. Brad wanted to go from our system where we only had strength, that basically affected all the classes' attack power, to a 3-stat system where it's strength, intelligence, and dexterity. So with that in mind, it was my job to go in and go like, okay, how can we get these 3 new stats working similar to what we had before? And from there, I can pull up the document that I was working on for that. So from there, we basically went like, okay, we also want to make all the enemies have bigger HP values. We wanted to change all our stat boosts to be percentage based. So with everything in mind, basically I went through and went like, okay, what are the old values we had, and how do we convert that to the new values that we have? So here you can see like, this is the levels of your player, this is the intelligence, the stats that the player would have, and this is the new damage output that you would get. In comparison to like our old version, so here you can see the enemies doing like 4 damage, up to 10 damage, 24 damage. That's a lot compared to what we had a long time ago, where we only had them doing about 11 damage, 8 damage, 5 damage. But the reason for this change was that we wanted our enemies to have as high as like 80 HP. So I wanted to make sure that the difficulty that you had facing these like level 2 enemies was consistently the same with the new values. So here I charted out basically how many times your hero can get hit. And over here I made sure that that value was more or less the same with the new values. So it's basically keeping everything consistent but having a new visual to it. The biggest aspect that changed was the percentage buffs. Everything from going like +1 armor, +2 armor, or +1 strength was now becoming 10% strength, 10% armor. But with the old values, everything was within like a 1 to 10 range. So a 10% gain was only like 1 point of change, and that didn't feel significant enough or impactful enough. So we wanted to go to bigger numbers so that you can actually feel like something's developing in your characters, and that things felt more relevant. So that was the biggest reason why we went for that kind of change. The problem with like the +1 or +2 kind of values thing is that it might be great early game, but then that +1 doesn't make much of a difference at the end of the game. It helped that Brad originally was like, I want to see the strongest enemy have 80 hit points. So that's already a basis where I can start from. And I knew that the original values, we sketched out the early enemies together actually, so that I'd had a starting point and an end point. So from there, you can pretty much fill in the gaps as you go along with the game. So that helped. So we have a strategy portion of the game called corruption, where basically if a region hits 100% corruption, it's destroyed. So you have 5 regions in the outside, 5 regions in the inside. And if 2 regions, if your outer and your inner regions are destroyed, they can hit the capital, which is pretty detrimental to the game. That's your losing scenario. So to basically balance that, we want to figure out how much corruption gain and loss would basically provide a good enough experience for the entire strategy portion of the game. The way we had it originally was that your regions would constantly be gaining corruption every day, and then if you won a battle, you would retract 10 corruption from that region, and if you lost a battle, you would gain 10 corruption. So we wanted to figure out how that affected all your playthroughs. So we did a quick chart out of what would that gameplay basically feel like. And we started noticing that all of the gameplays or the randomizations, every single time, all your regions would fall together. So it was a lot of plate spinning kind of gameplay where it's oh, you have the choice of saving one region or the next, but then they're all going to die the next turn. So it felt really crappy in that sense. We wanted more of a, you're going to choose to save this region no matter what, and the other ones will fall, or see one of the regions explode as early as year 100. But the way we had it, it was impossible. So we decided to pretty much figure out new ways to make the corruption affect the strategy layer in a different way. So we thought of this idea called morale, where it would accelerate all your corruption. So that's also inputted into the spreadsheet where if you win a battle, it would basically decelerate the value of corruption. If you lost battles, then it would accelerate the corruptions by a lot. So theoretically, it's this region will be 4 times as fast as another region. So you would see that kind of change where it's this region's gonna explode faster than the other one. But it turns out that even with that kind of implementation, everything was still falling together at the same time. So that was the biggest thing we learned about this simulation. So from there, we went to a more simplistic model where you wouldn't see corruption gain every day. You would only just lose it or gain it from winning battles. And from that, we figured out that, oh, this kind of simulation actually was interesting because as early as year 100, you would lose a region, and that's exactly what we wanted. But by the end of the game, you wouldn't have lost everything. You'd have lost 3 tops. So we thought this model fit the game, or what we wanted, a lot closer. Mm-hmm. Everything is pretty calculative. You could easily go winning this battle is going to have this kind of effect. You can pretty much chart out everything that's going to happen as long as you know what a player would do. If a player is always going to go for the min-max idea kind of thing, that's really easy to chart out. It's harder to chart out anything that's more random in nature, this player just likes this region for its flavor. You never know. So that's impossible to simulate. But based on what a normal player or your average player would do, I created this Google spreadsheet basically to predict what that player would do at all times. And this is the result we got. So one of the biggest things I think that helps with that is your technology that you research. So new weapons, new armors. The problem with a lot of strategy games was that by the time that you research those new armors or new weapons, the enemies has just grown right along with you and pretty much made it so that nothing has changed. But if you don't upgrade it, then it's you're gonna lose pretty much. There wasn't a clear, concise answer to what we wanted in terms of that. We didn't want upgrades to be mandatory, but at the same time, it should be pretty clear that you should do it. But even without it, it should be possible to beat the game. So playtesting that was took a lot of time. So here we have a lot of playthroughs that I pretty much went through and documented and went okay, this is what happens in an average playthrough. This is how much experience you're going to get. This is how high of a level your enemies or your characters will have. your corruption values, basically mapping out everything that happens within the game. Even random events, what levels you put your like regents and everyone into. So using that as like a basis, it helped a lot trying to figure out like what the enemies or how strong the enemies should be at like certain years, where like you're not forced to upgrade like your armors by this year, but you have more of a leeway to do so.
To other people who are sort of considering like a intern position or just sort of working briefly with like a big studio, like how valuable do you think this experience was?
I think it's very valuable because you don't know if you're going to enjoy what you've signed up to do, pretty much. Interning anywhere for that position pretty much is like a test to like, oh, am I actually going to enjoy this? Is this what I want to do? And it gives you that snippet of reality before actually diving into it for yourself. So I think everyone should probably try interning at the job that they want to before actually doing it. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I would totally do game design for Double Fine again, or anywhere else even. So I learned that I enjoy game design. So that's my walk away from this.